Arc lights. I remember when, as the days grew shorter in the fall, it got dark right after supper. So kids played at the corner under the street light. Kick the wicket, kick the can, or hide and seek were some of the games suitable for playing after dark under the arc light. But it wasn't an arc light. Clearfield never had arc lights. Real arc lights burned a carbon rod to create the light and thus needed an attendant to occasionally replace and or trim the rods. Someone like the man suggested by the song, The Old Lamp Lighter. That was too expensive for small towns. We played under incandescent lights and mistakenly called them arc lights. Miller Dairy. I remember when Miller Dairy delivered milk in panel trucks to households in and around Clearfield. Paul Parker, a delivery man, started loading milk from the cooler into his truck at 1:30 in the morning. Several times I foolishly agreed as a kid to get up in the middle of the night to help him. After we had the truck loaded, he said, "Now we'll have breakfast." He mixed a pint of cream with a pint of chocolate milk for each of us. Calories, calories, calories. I have never since had such a rich, tasty meal, and it didn't last till the end of the milk route either. Throwing apples. I remember when, in mid-August, the wild apple trees produced the perfect sized apples for throwing from the pointy end of a 30-inch stick. The stick was a slightly flexible branch cut from the tree with the small end sharpened to a point. An apple was pushed onto the point, not too far or it wouldn't release, but far enough so it didn't fall off. It was thrilling for a boy to see how far away he could toss one of those half-grown apples that had fallen from the tree. My cousin, Sonny Bowers, was the best in town for throwing apples. No one could throw farther, and mine only went about half as far as his did. We had lots of fun without store-bought toys. Sonny, later, did very well throwing baseballs too. Evergreen Trees. I remember when the federal government created the CCC and the WPA, both programs that provided valuable jobs for young men who needed work during hard times. A type of project both groups worked on was reforestation, planting trees. One of those groups planted 8-inch evergreen seedlings on a side hill at the end of Barclay Street, spacing them in rows 5 or 6 feet apart. Several years later, the seedlings became trees about 3 or 4 feet tall. In summer, young boys, after hiking or playing on the hill above, would jump those trees, take 1 or 2 steps, then jump the next, with tree tops dragging between their legs. Have a look at those trees today. They are some 60 feet high. No way to get over them now. Well, perhaps maybe in my airplane. Balloon ride. I remember when Evelyn and I traveled to New Mexico in a small airplane to attend the balloon festival at Albuquerque, which is held in the fall, with at least 100 hot air balloons taking part for about 1 week. This was our opportunity to go up, up, and away. We rented a car and then stayed at a wonderful bed and breakfast private home for 4 nights. We had purchased our tickets for a ride during Special Shapes Day and arrived at the balloon site before daylight. We waited in the dark with other passengers while the balloons were being filled with hot air. When I discovered Clearfielders, Mary and Paul Swales, our former next-door neighbors, waiting in the same group of passengers. What a coincidence. They were visiting New Mexico relatives and were assigned to the very same balloon as we were. The basket held the pilot and 6 passengers. Evelyn and I went in the first flight, and the Swales, with 4 others, rode in a van, which followed the balloon to wherever it might land. When our balloon lifted off the ground, it drifted southward, and then as we gained altitude, we went northwest, all the while looking at the many special-shaped balloons up there with us. When we got a little higher, we began to drift eastward until we were directly north of the launch site. The pilot released some hot air so we could descend into the southerly airstream, and we flew directly over the spot where we had launched. That air movement is known as the Albuquerque box. We soon landed in an open field and got out of the basket, and the Swales got in for a ride. The wind speed had picked up during their flight, and the balloon made a rough second landing, and Mary was slightly injured. The basket and balloon were loaded onto a trailer pulled by the van. Then the pilot provided a champagne toast before we returned to the launch site. The ride was an amazing experience, especially with the unexpected accompaniment of Mary and Paul, our former West Side neighbors. Taste it. I pretended.
There you go.
The first day of first grade. I remember when my mother walked with me to the Third Ward schoolhouse for my very first half day in school at age 6. She got me seated in Miss Onstott's classroom before she went home. Miss Onstott was my older sister's teacher when she was in the first grade. Before long, I was taken out of that room and put in the other first grade classroom, Miss Ferguson's room. Oh no, what will my mother think about this? Almost a block from home, I turned on the tears and bawling, fearful of what mother would do to me when I got there. Surprisingly, she only said, "That's all right. Miss Ferguson is a good teacher, too. You'll like her." And I did. She taught me to spell small words and read short sentences. I wrote her a thank you note when I became 65 years old. She said it made her cry. How was your first day at school? The shoe factory. I remember when, and maybe you do too, there was a shoe factory in Lawrence Township, just outside of Clearfield. Trouble is, they never made any shoes, not even one pair. The Clearfield Industrial Development Corporation had made an agreement with a New England manufacturer to move their shoemaking equipment into a new building here in Clearfield. The manufacturer was to hire and train local people for the labor to make the shoes. While the equipment was being moved, the company owner decided his family badly needed a relaxing vacation. So they went to Europe for 3 weeks, or was it 3 months? When they returned to the United States, the owner declared the company bankrupt. Thus, no shoes were made. The building is now part of Kurtz Brothers warehousing facilities along Route 322 East near the Clearfield Creek Bridge. Huckleberries. I remember when parents didn't have the money to give their kids an allowance. So boys and girls found ways to earn some spare change themselves. They sold cloverine salve, made in Tyrone, peddled the Progress or the Grit, and later the TV Guide, or maybe sold berries. That's what I did. Sold huckleberries, wild strawberries, and raspberries. It wasn't bad picking them in the hot sun, but I hated selling them to our neighbors. My sales pitch was something like this. "I know you don't want to buy any huckleberries, do you?" And then turn to walk off the front porch. I just didn't want to hear them say no. But then I almost always went home with some cash, but not the berries. Model airplanes and sneakers. I remember when building model airplanes was a good hobby for young boys during the 1930s. It required dexterity and taught him patience as well as aerodynamics. My cousin Delbert Bowl was proficient in building flying models and even had a miniature gasoline engine to power his many planes. Like most kids, I used large rubber bands to turn the propeller on mine. We used a hand-powered drill, similar to an egg beater, to wind the many turns needed to stay aloft for a couple of minutes. It was fun to watch your own home-built airplane flying in the sky until it crashed. One year there was a contest to see whose airplane could fly the longest time. My plane won second place, and the prize was a brand new pair of sneakers from Brown's Boot Shop. Wow! Knickers and knee socks. I remember when school clothes in winter were an embarrassment for young boys. Up until fourth grade, they wore knickers and knee socks. When the temperature was extremely cold, they wore long underwear, which was obvious under the knee socks. Wow, the girls could tell what you were wearing. How embarrassing. If your parents could afford it, they bought some high-top boots for you. They covered your knee socks, and your vanity was spared. High tops were made from leather and had laces clear to the top. Most high-top boots came with a bonus, a small 3-blade pocket knife that fit perfectly in a pocket on the left boot. My grandfather's carpentry business. I remember when my grandfather Bowers had his own carpentry business, erecting buildings and houses, some remodeling, and quite often moving buildings. His 4 sons were all carpenters. They walked to their job, as did most people in the 1920s and 30s. They carried their lunch pails. Their tools were kept in their own toolboxes, which were moved to the next job site on Granddad's small truck. All materials such as lumber, hardware, etc., were delivered by the suppliers back then. My granddad had one of the few telephones in Clearfield, so he could order materials to be delivered the next day. It was a 2-piece desk telephone without a dial or numbered buttons. He didn't need them because he talked to the telephone operator to ring up his calls. Clearfield had 2 competing phone companies in those days. My 6th grade teacher, Miss Decker. I remember when Miss Louise Decker, start over. My 6th grade teacher, Miss Decker. I remember when Miss Louise Decker was my 6th grade school teacher in the junior high building on South Front Street in 1936. I think she was a good teacher and nice person, but we didn't get to know her very well. Sometime in October or November, a substitute teacher took over the classroom. Miss Decker had become ill. A couple weeks later, our substitute teacher was called out of the room. After about 5 minutes, she and 2 other teachers came into the classroom and announced that Miss Decker has died. What a shock that was for those 25 or so 11-year-old students, and also for the teachers. We were instructed to go home for the rest of the day. It was spooky quiet in that classroom for at least a week. The children were showing their respect for their former teacher. The 1936 St. Patrick's Day flood. I remember when the winter of 1935-36 provided us with more snow than most years, and then gave us warm, heavy rain in mid-March, melting the snow, and that resulted in the St. Patrick's Day flood. Our mother was busy having a fifth-year birthday party for my sister Alice on the day the flooding began, March 17th. Our house was far enough from the river not to be threatened by rising waters. Parents showed much concern about the water level when they came to pick up their youngsters. My dad and I walked partly across the Market Street Bridge where the flood was rushing under it. The next day we walked down Clearfield Street to see the floodwaters all the way up to the railroad. It was frightening to see so many homes surrounded by water. My Uncle Walter, as a fireman, spent that first night helping people get out of their homes after the water had risen and surrounded their house. Our house was filled with people for a couple of days, some even sleeping on the floor. The Curwensville Dam has put a stop to the flooding for about 50 years now. Shoe repairing. I remember when leather was the prevalent material used in manufacturing shoes. Leather uppers, leather heels, and soles, sometimes even cowhide laces. The cost for shoes was a major item in our family budget, so we had to make our shoes last as long as possible. If they needed repairs, Clearfield had at least 10 shoe repair shops. 4 on West Side that I recall: John Esposito at 6 Nickel Street, Joseph Marino at 209 Nickel Street, Roy Graham at rear of 616 West Front Street, and Weaver Conklin at 611 McBride Street. There were also 4 downtown and at least 2 in East End. When we took our shoes for repair, we asked to have them half soled if the front was worn out, or re-heeled if the back was gone. Seems like the shop at 209 Nickel Street was the last one to close its door permanently. What do slaughterhouses do with all the cowhides nowadays? Tomatoes. I remember when my dad got the hives when he ate too many tomatoes. I never got the hives. No, not beehives, because I didn't eat tomatoes, and that was because I don't really like them. In 1942, when I was 17 years old, I painted steam locomotives in Renova for 3 months during summer school vacation. I stayed with Uncle Archie and Aunt Winifred Frey, and she packed my lunch bucket. She put a tomato in it for the first day, and I gave it to a buddy. I don't like them. Then another tomato the next day, which I threw away. Ah, no, a tomato every day. After the first week, I couldn't find the courage to tell her that I had wasted all those tomatoes. so I tried for several days to eat some. That didn't work, so I gave away or wasted a lot more tomatoes. However, my favorite soup is tomato soup. I like to visit my aunt and uncle's gravesite occasionally because they were so good to me.